Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley, and I am thrilled to be here at OmnichannelX. Today, we're going to talk about the new rules of content strategy for audience everywhere. So I want to start with a bit of an odd question, but I'm hoping you'll indulge me. And that is, what is the best piece of playground equipment? You could pop your answers into the chat. You could shout it out if you've got a pet or a roommate. You could just think it in your head. But what is the best piece of playground equipment? Now, when I ask this question in person, I tend to get a lot of different answers. I get the slide or the swings or the merry-go-round. I even get a couple of sarcastic people who shout out the park bench. And what this tells me is that there's not just one best piece of playground equipment. There's no consensus. There's not a right answer. Now, you may be asking, why am I asking you about the best piece of playground equipment at a professional conference? We're going to get there. But for now, let's pretend that I put you on that merry-go-round, spun you around, you fell off, hit your head, and we're now in a place where we're talking about the linear funnel. Rough ride, I know, but I promise I'm going to bring it back around. Now, most of the marketers in the audience are familiar with this model, but it may not be as familiar to people from other disciplines. So let's talk through it. At its core, it's three phases: awareness, consideration, and decision. And what a lot of marketers do is they whip out their editorial calendar and they say, I'm going to create 2 pieces of content per phase. That's 6 pieces of content. I'll publish once per month. I now have 6 months of content strategy, right? 6 months of content strategy. Now, you're all shaking your heads and saying, it's a bit more complicated than that. And of course, you're right. So these are the Google results for the linear funnel. And you'll notice there's some complicated stuff. We've got like multiple phases. We've got it bowing in and out. Like, clearly we need a different model. So being a smart crew, we came up with the looping decision journey. And at its core, it's 4 phases: awareness, consideration, purchase, and some sort of upsell, cross-sell, or retention phase. And somehow that's going to put you back into the same kind of awareness, consideration, purchase loop. Not quite sure why you just go back to the top, but let's say that's how it's supposed to work. You're going to add 2 additional pieces of content. That's 8 pieces of content, still once per month. I now have 8 months of content strategy, right? Good job, marketer. And of course, you're all shaking your head saying, it's way more complicated than that. And of course, you are correct. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but I have to say, in these Google results, the most disconcerting image is that one for me down on the bottom right of the screen, the Mobius. How many of you have been stuck in the infinite loop of sales and marketing content? It's terrifying. So if it's not a linear funnel and it's not a looping decision journey, what is it? So I decided that we needed a new model. And I got really excited because one of the things that you notice about both of those is they kind of ignore what happens once someone makes a purchase. The linear journal completely says, hey, not my problem once you actually buy. And the looping decision journey hands it off to some other team. So what if we were to connect those? And I got excited because I thought this piece of equipment, what we call a jungle gym in the United States, I've solved it. It's got some connection points, and you kind of have the ability to go around this piece of equipment. But the problem is there's only one objective with the jungle gym, and that's to get to the very top. And so it's still me forcing you to go on a journey that I want you to go on, which brings us back to the playground. What's the right way to play on the playground? What's the best order? Is it to go slides and then swing and then merry-go-round? Is it to skip the slide altogether? And what about the people sitting on the park bench? Are they using the playground in the wrong way? Of course not. So we need to think about treating this journey as a playground. Now, as a marketer, I would say we need to treat the buyer journey as a playground. As sales or customer success, you might say we need to treat the customer journey as a playground. And if you're in UX or design, you might say we need to treat the user journey as a playground. Now, the problem with this mindset is that we're still shifting this journey and calling this person different things based on the team or the asset type that my team creates. We can't even come to an agreement on shared language about who the heck we're talking to. So first, I would propose that we agree that we need to treat the audience journeys as a playground. People can enter and exit as they desire, they can go in any order, and they can engage in content the wrong way. So what does it look like to engage with content the wrong way? The playground designers expect you to go down the slides. My 3-year-old nephew wants to go up the slides every time. And our audience wants to do the same thing. Let's take pricing as an example. Pricing is traditionally considered a bottom of funnel or purchase level discussion. But when my boss came to me and said, Ashley, I think we need to buy this tool to solve this problem. Can you let me know how much budget we need? I got to go ask for budget. So how much should I ask for? I have no idea. So I start Googling around and I come upon some of the big players in the space. And I reach out to them and I say, hey, could you give me a ballpark so I can go secure budget for this many licenses at this service level? And they came back to me and said, well, you need to download this white paper. Actually, have you attended this webinar? You know what you need to do? You need to book a demo. I don't even have budget. I'm not even in the awareness phase because I don't have budget. Now, that may sound a little confusing. Clearly, you're aware if you're Googling around. But from a marketing and sales standpoint, we don't count these people until they've officially raised their hand by filling out a form and entering our funnel. And on the product or support or documentation side of the house, we don't count these people until they actually log into the tool for the first time. And so we completely ignore someone who may be looking to secure budget because they haven't gone all the way through our funnel. Now, on the flip side of that, I secured budget. I get on the phone with the sales rep and I say, hey, I'm bought in on the problem. I'm bought in that a tool like yours is going to solve it. So tell me why I need to buy your tool. And they wanted to go all the way up to the top of their deck and say, well, let me first frame up the problem. I'm like, I'm bought in. Sell me your product. And they struggled to drop me all the way down into the bottom of the funnel before they worked through all the other phases. So if we're not just mapping content to each phase of the funnel, how are we building our content? So I want to introduce a narrative framework that's based on content depth. First, we talk about the conceptual depth. This is the what and the why of the idea. This is to help your audience frame up the problem space. Next is the strategic depth. And this is the process, tools, and key knowledge components that must be in place to make the conceptual idea reality. This is helping them think about the solution space and think about what success means and the criteria for success. Now, I want to be clear, this is not just the tool or service or solution that you provide. It's helping them think holistically about all possible solutions. And finally, the tactical depth. Now, a lot of people like to spend time here because it's super straightforward. It's prescriptive. It's the nitty-gritty where the rubber meets the road. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this just a linear journey? You learn about the why, you learn about the how, and then you put it into practice. But what we'll see as we go through the case study, that's not true. You could jump from tactical all the way up to conceptual. You could jump between strategic, conceptual, and tactical levels. So you need to create these pieces of content to be able to stand on their own and serve the user intent, no matter where they land as their first step. Next, we need to think holistically about our distribution. So our assets, are these written? Are they video? Are they audio? Are they long form? Are they short form? Are they interactive? Are they live? Are they pre-recorded? Right? Think holistically about the different assets you could create. Now, what tends to happen is the blog team says it's a blog, the support team says it's a support ticket, the documentation team says it's a very specific tutorial. And each team defaults to thinking that their asset that they execute is the only asset that the person needs. So open up that mindset, talk amongst your teammates to realize that actually a tutorial could be exactly what they need when they're looking for an answer and support, right? Next, your channels. So this is a mix of paid, owned, and earned channels, and it can be a place to both host and share content. And finally, metrics. And I want to be clear, all assets and all channels do not need to meet all metrics all the time. You're going to struggle to optimize for reach, engagement, and CTR with the same asset in all the channels at all times. So how do we think about strategically mapping our metrics to both the channels and assets that we create? So what does this look like in the real world? Let's take an example. What does it mean to be healthy and fit? Now, most people would agree it's some combination of diet and exercise. But you're going to answer that question very differently if you're Runner's World versus Muscle and Fitness versus Yoga Journal. I personally prefer bodybuilding workouts. So let's dig in and answer this question as if we're Muscle and Fitness magazine. At a conceptual level, you would say you're healthy and fit if you have a high protein diet and big, strong muscles. At the strategic level, you might talk about the value of compound lifts or how to have good form when lifting. And you might talk about the differences between fast and slow digesting protein. And at the tactical level, this is your 10 tips to build bigger biceps or 5 chicken dinner recipes to make for dinner this week. And so if we map this to our strategic framework for the narrative and distribution, you would be able to fill out a table that looks something like this. You have your top line narrative about what it means to be healthy and fit, and then you have your topics mapped to their different depths. And what you'll notice is that you could have multiple asset types and multiple channels to address each of these pain points. So for example, on the compound lifts, you may decide, hey, I'm going to make a strategic video that I place on Facebook. Or you may say, I'm going to make a conceptual video that I place on Vimeo and YouTube. Same thing, you could drop all the way down to the tactical level and say these 5 exercises for bigger biceps might become an infographic on Pinterest or a video that goes on Instagram stories. So how do we apply this from a business perspective? I want to walk you through an Atlassian case study that maps our agile practices and products to a variety of different assets and channels across multiple teams. So what is the right journey? I get this question a lot. And as we think about mapping our assets, of course, like most people, we started with the linear funnel. And we said at a high level, we want people to learn about agile practices. It's very important that people work collaboratively, they work in an agile way, they're nimble and flexible. So we created an asset that really focuses on how do you implement agile practices. And then at the strategic level, we said, hey, you can drop down and see Agile in action. And so it's a mix of strategic content and a little bit of tactical content to say, hey, look at a tutorial. You could do this with any product. You could do it with Post-it notes. You could do it with various tools, but we're going to show you how to do it in Jira, which is our tool. And then you can download a free account. And so you could start to practice Agile. You can start to create backlogs and boards and sprints in the tool for free. And finally, you decide that, you know what, I'm bought in on Agile. I'm bought in on Jira. I'm going to buy in with my credit card. And I've put some green arrows across, and you can see they get darker as you go to represent how close you are to getting the money. And this is great, right? They purchased the tool, we won, we got the money. And you'll see it took a couple of steps here, but finally at the very end, we got the money. This is the right journey. But what if there was a journey where you get the money first, where they start by buying and using the tool? Now you may be asking, cool, we won, we got the money, right? Like, I don't understand why we need to continue talking about whatever happens over here. But the reality is we know that people still need to learn once they get into the product. They're still going to have questions, and they may still need to know about the conceptual level and strategic level about agile practices, artifacts, and ceremonies. So in that case, we show that we've got the green arrow, we got the money first. But then when you go to the product, the first thing it asks is, do you want to use Scrum or Kanban? I don't know. I don't know the difference between Scrum and Kanban. So you need to pop all the way back up to understand how Scrum and Kanban fit into Agile. Then you start to say, great, I've learned about Scrum. How do I do it with this tool? And so you drop down into a tutorial that shows you how to do Scrum with Jira. And then finally, you come back to the tool that you already own and you start to practice with this tool. Now, you may be saying, how are they going to end up buying the tool if they don't know about Agile or they haven't practiced? Well, how often does IT purchase a tool and tell everyone that this is the new tool that they're using? Frequently. So this actually happened for one of our customers. She showed up at a training for some new tool that IT had purchased. And it turns out that she needed to learn Agile practices. So she visited the Agile microsite from this, based on this training for a tool that she had no input or decision in buying. And then last, let's talk about a time where maybe you see Agile in action. You attend something on project management and they showcase using Agile in Jira. And you think to yourself, maybe I should learn more about Agile. And so you start Googling around, or you go directly to the site and you learn more about Agile practices. And then you say, man, this seems really cool. I think I'm going to buy this tool. And then once you purchase this tool, then you come back in and you start practicing it and inviting your teammates. So in all of these cases, these journeys end up with a purchase, but they also end up with a lot of high-level education and strategic level education. So how are we going to create enough assets and enough connection points between those assets to satisfy any of the journeys that our audience might go on? So as you can see here, it's a lot of assets and a lot of connection points. So we have an Agile microsite, we have a product tour, we have a number of tutorials, we have YouTube, we have social, we have a community, we have a lot of different ways for people to engage. But what I want you to focus on is the connection points between each of these things, because this is how we bring our teams together and our content together to create a seamless journey for our audience. So let's dig into a couple of these different assets and see how they're used throughout the journey. First, the Agile Coach. So a few years ago, the team created this microsite, and it's primarily focused on long-form written content, and it's optimized from an SEO perspective. Then they use this content as the basis for the script for a YouTube series of short videos that lives on YouTube, and these two things are cross-linked. So you'll see there's Scrum in the sidebar in the Agile Coach, and then there's also What is Scrum on YouTube. And then in the description of that video, there's Learn More About Scrum, which takes you to the Agile microsite. And then we've also embedded that video into the long form article. So no matter how you land on it, you have the ability to choose to read or watch to learn about Scrum. Now, we also say, great, you agree, you're bought in, you want to try Scrum. How the heck do you do this with a tool? And we have the option for you to go and learn about it with Jira software, and the opportunity for you to open a free account so that you can practice. You have both of those paths. So let's say you choose the tutorial. You learn more about how to do this specifically with the tool, and then there's a link in the sidebar that says, hey, go see how you can do this with Jira. Get your own account. Once you land on the landing page, yes, it's more sales, it's more marketing, it's explaining the features and the benefits. But throughout this page, we have the ability to up-level back up to the conceptual or strategic levels. If you're not sure what Scrum is, you have the ability to go and learn about Scrum. So no matter how you land on any of these pages, you have the ability to get to the conceptual, strategic, or tactical depth that's associated with it. Now, this probably looks pretty optimized from a marketing standpoint. You're like, yeah, this is what marketers do, but what about support? What about content design? Well, we noticed something interesting. Our support documentation and our onboarding information is available publicly on the internet, which means that it shows up in search results. And so we noticed there's a lot of people who are landing in our documentation as their first step. Why? It's because all of the keywords managing epics in a Scrum project are very specifically tailored to the question. But what this means when someone lands in documentation is that they've probably arrived there with a very specific question about how to do this in a tool versus asking generically, what is Scrum? They're still at that education or learn intent at the conceptual or strategic level. But they could land here from in-product help. They could land here from organic search. They could land here from an email that they've received. And so we had to start talking really closely with our technical writing, support, and content design teams to make sure that those journeys and those user intents were very closely tied together. So that if you are asking generally what is Scrum, we land you on purely educational, tool agnostic content. If you're asking about how to do Scrum in Jira, we want to make sure that you get the specific detailed information that you need from that documentation. We also looked at our product demos. Now, again, demos are traditionally considered a bottom of funnel conversation or something that potentially the marketing team owns. But in our case, we partner very closely with product, engineering, and design to create these videos. So instead of using voiceover actors or marketers, we have the person who influenced, designed, or made the feature as the person who's explaining it. And then we pair that content with an Ask Me Anything in our community. So product design engineering create these specific videos from an authentic voice, and they share these on YouTube. And then we embed that into our community with the opportunity for people to ask questions directly of the product engineering or design person. And so you're getting authentic answers, enthusiastic answers from people who are closest to these features and products. We also do this on social media. So previously, we've been talking mostly about owned channels, but social is where our audience is hanging out. They're giving us feedback there. Again, they don't want to open a support ticket. They want to just shout out to the world, I have a problem. And so when we launched a big update to our flagship product, Jira, we actually created an entire program partnering with a social care team that's primarily focused on support, but also bringing in product engineering, marketing, and design folks to answer these questions. And so as you can see, people really liked it. I like this trend of PMs directly answering some questions, direct accountability, and direct feedback. Is this you answering on your own or an official thing at Atlassian? And you'll notice that it's both. You can see the official handle answering some questions, but you'll also notice there's two Atlassians, Taylor and Claire, who have chimed in to answer this person's specific concerns. So I'll give you another example that's at the intersection of product, marketing, support, sales, social, all the channels, right? So we were working on creating feature parity among two of our editions. And so once we reached that feature parity, someone wrote some launch notes or release notes to say, hey, we have this new thing. Unfortunately, the way that they phrased it caused a bit of an uproar in the Agile community. So story points and estimation are highly controversial with this audience. And so it caused a kerfuffle on social media. Well, it turns out that we actually have a long form article about story points and estimation that speaks broadly about this topic. But because of that kerfuffle, we recognized we need to address this more specifically. To do that, we reached out to a number of Agile experts in the industry and hosted a roundtable to talk about where story points went wrong, how you can get them back on track, and what are some of the best practices. We then published that to YouTube, and we also shared that in our community so that people could ask questions and share their specific experience using story points and estimation. We then embedded that roundtable into the long-form article and cross-linked the two. So all of these things are cross-linked. You can ask the questions, you can just watch the video, you can read more about general best practices. And of course, all of this was shared on social media. But the cool thing is that it wasn't just shared from the Atlassian product handles. It was also shared by the participants in the roundtable. So one of my colleagues was the moderator for this roundtable. She's also an Agile expert, and she shared this on her LinkedIn profile, tagging the other speakers who could then share and engage as well. So you're going to create all of this stuff, but how do you know if any of it is working? So marketers in particular are particularly obsessed with CTR. How many people clicked? How many people opened? How many people referred? How many people who clicked? But what we realize is that these platforms are very greedy. So LinkedIn wants you to stay on LinkedIn, Twitter wants you to stay on Twitter, etc. And people are lazy. They don't want to have to click a link. They want to just get value in the feed. And so the platforms prioritize content that keeps you in the feed, and the people are interested in engaging right where they are. So if that's how it's going to work, people aren't just going to go to your owned platforms all the time. How do we think holistically about measurement? So let's think about video, brand paid search, organic traffic, and unpaid social. Now, these metrics may look particularly tailored to a marketing-focused audience or team. But what if you could answer your support questions with better documentation that's shared on YouTube? What if you could shift a lot of that support and onboarding into social media? So of course, as marketers, we're going to think about average watch time. We're going to think about entrances. We're going to think about engagement in the feed. But if you're helping people succeed from a product standpoint, how might you engage on these channels? And then these metrics may look particularly tied to something like customer success or UX, this customer satisfaction. And it's retention and happiness. It's not just, hey, they sucked it up and stayed here and renewed. It's, are they getting value from the tools that you're providing? And again, time to resolution. As a marketer, you may think, yeah, I mean, sure, they had an incident, like that's somebody else's problem. But we go back to the pricing example. What if they could answer the pricing question immediately because you're transparent and you're providing that information in the place where they land? And of course, usage. So are people watching the content? Are they reading the content? Are they sharing the content? Are they engaging with it? Are they using the features? Are they using in-product help? Are they engaging on your community? So I love this quote from Jay Acunzo. It says, marketing is no longer about grabbing attention. It's about holding it. Today's best marketers understand marketing isn't about who arrives, it's about who stays. And this goes beyond just the marketers who are trying to get people into the product or service. Because in today's world, products have to sell themselves. You have to have this intuitive, fluid experience to win and re-win the hearts and minds of your audience throughout their life cycle. And so once the free trial ends, what happens? Once they want to upgrade from a free account to a standard account, how does that happen? If somebody has a problem or an incident or a question, where do they go? And so we need to think holistically about grabbing the attention and holding the attention to build that relationship, no matter where they are in the audience life cycle. So the ideal customer journey used to be about rushing people to a purchase, as few touch points as possible to get you to buy. But today, we understand that the ideal customer journey is the most seamless handoff, no matter what journey or path your audience chooses. So how do we build this playground journey? First, delight the audience. Focus on quality content that engages, educates, and empowers. Next, build the relationship. The long-term affinity for the brand and the trust that you engage and build is going to be much more important in the long run than a single transactional conversion. And finally, influence at every touch point. So at this point, all content can be considered top of funnel. It's no longer about rushing people to a purchase. It's about educating and empowering. And yes, your support documentation may show up in the search results. You may need to have a pricing conversation sooner than you thought. So who wants to play? Who's ready to help me build this playground? Now, of course, at some point, you have to execute on all of this. And if you're interested in doing that, I would love to tell you how Jira, Confluence, and Trello can help you do that. Thank you so much for joining me here at OmnichannelX, and I'll open it up for Q&A.